If everybody could sit back down, I hope you've got coffee if you needed it and so on. So let me tell you how we're going to run this last bit. First of all, my colleague Paul is going to have a few slides to introduce the panel discussion. Now, we had some questions from the panel members. If you remember, I think Lucy asked us if there was a difference between obstetric and thrombotic APS. And then we were asked whether there are any alternatives to warfarin, which I kind of addressed a little bit in my talk. And Danny would like to know what triggers off caps. So we'll deal with those questions. And then we'll open it up to the audience. Kate will be running around with a roving microphone. What I would ask you is, because we're into time, if you could keep your questions a little bit short, please, and could you tell us which member of the panel you're directing the question to? For example, you might have a question specifically about warfarin for Yvonne, or about strokes for Kath, or something like that. Say who you'd like to answer and what your question is, and if anybody else wants to chip in, that's how we'll do it. I don't want to be all Fiona Bruce about this, but you know how it is. All right? Over to you, Paul.
Good. Thank you very much. And obviously there should be questions because this is a dialogue. So we will have questions also for our patients here and everyone in the crowd. But if you remember at the end of my talk, I left a few slides that I wanted to just come back. And it's just a gathering of ideas that I've had over the years that I think struck with me and left an impression. So the first one, you remember that sliver, 5%. This is the quote we got when I went to a meeting like this with patients with lupus who had their own sessions separately from a group of rheumatologists that were treating lupus. And when we came at the end together, after being some reflection, we were asking, what is the impact your doctor has on your decision about what we'll do about managing your lupus? That's the answer, consensual answer we got from 25 patients. And that is what the physicians thought, which I actually, the blue size, but they thought that at least 50% of what their patient is important. So maybe you want to keep that in mind, because there is obviously a disconnect in perceptions. We're very involved with making decisions, and we think because we make a decision, this is automatically going to be adopted. I think there's a difference there. The second point was this, and I think it might be related to your question a bit earlier about having difficulty finding the right expert with the right expertise when you have a rare disease. And obviously, this is for lupus, but if for APS, there are models where you could maybe bring together a group of experts. The problem in Canada is geography. I don't know here in the UK, but it's very difficult to have these centers in very remote areas. My patients, travel 12 hours to come and see us in the expertise center. So to get all of what is needed is difficult. But model of care, can we think of model of care in APS or in rare diseases? The third point, I think, alludes to all of the four testimonies we've had today, and it's the window analogy. And a little bit like Anisser was mentioning a bit earlier today, he had an experience where he crossed over to accompany his mother to be in the healthcare system. I had to accompany a relative of mine to the same experience, and the window analogy was given to me, was useful. So imagine you have a computer screen, and you have a window, and the butterfly is a sign for lupus, but put the APS UK symbol. And when you're diagnosed, or when this happens to you, the whole window is basically APS, and there's no way you can get out of this. This is obscuring everything else in the background. It's taking all of your time. But with time, and I think, again, the testimonies we've had today, maybe you being able, windows, you can the window down, and you can start having other options that are appearing, which is basically the rest of your life is still there. It's been obscured by what has happened to you, but there's the rest of your life. And you can bring the window down, and if needed, it's going to back into the big screen, but at least you have the control of maybe bringing it back down. And again, with more time, and this is my son, by the way, many, many years ago, but that was a picture we took. You can maybe bring the window even in a much smaller place. Ideally, you really want to bring the window here, right? Minimum space in your life. And it's not to say that you want to deny it. No, it's going to be there. And if it comes back, the window can come back or can come back a bit big. You have to deal with that episode, that trough, I understood. But this is another point I wanted to make, the window analogy. And then finally, so it could be APS. And then the guides, if you saw in the APS UK Foundation has that, there is resources that are available 24/7 online sometimes when you need information, because your physician cannot be always available, or your healthcare worker. And in that, we've developed the online lupus guide, which is another analogy, but with sections specifically geared for lupus. So I have lupus, what's next? Where can I find support? Living well with lupus. Learn more about this disease, especially for caretakers and relatives and friends, and help someone with lupus. So I just want to leave this with a few ideas before we start the panel.